The man who wrestled with God is one of the most enigmatic and powerful passages in the Bible, where physical struggle intertwines with spirituality and human perseverance finds divine grace. But before we start our story, don't forget to subscribe. This story, centered on Jacob, deepens the confrontation between man and the divine, revealing profound lessons of faith, determination, and transformation. Through this battle, Jacob not only receives a blessing, but also a new identity, marking one of the most emblematic moments in the biblical journey. Let's go back many years, to a time when families were large, and a father's blessing over his children was considered something sacred. There was Rebekah, wife of Isaac, pregnant with twins. But from the beginning, it was not an ordinary pregnancy. Rebekah felt something strange within her womb, a constant agitation, as if her two children were already fighting, even before they were born. Intrigued and worried, she asked God what was happening. God responded to Rebekah in a surprising way. "Two nations are in your womb, and from now on, one will be stronger than the other. The older will serve the younger." With this answer, Rebekah knew that these boys would have a great destiny, but also one full of conflicts. And the day of the birth arrived. The first to be born was red and completely covered in hair, looking like a mantle of fur. They named him Esau, but something curious happened right after. The second baby, Jacob, came into the world holding his brother's heel, as if trying to pull him back into the womb, already showing his desire not to be left behind. The two boys grew up with very different personalities. Esau was a man of the field, strong and a hunter, the pride of his father Isaac, who loved eating the meat of the animals that Esau hunted. Jacob, on the other hand, preferred to stay at home, tending to the family's affairs and always by the side of his mother, Rebekah, who loved him deeply. But the rivalry that began in Rebekah's womb did not fade with time. It only grew. One day, Esau returned from a long hunt, famished and nearly without strength, and found Jacob cooking a stew. The delicious smell of that food made Esau beg, "Please, give me some of that stew. I'm dying of hunger." Jacob, always clever, saw an opportunity. He knew that Esau, as the eldest son, had the right to the birthright, a special blessing that gave the firstborn the largest part of the inheritance and the leadership of the family. So, without hesitation, Jacob made a proposal that would forever change their lives. "I'll give you the stew, but first, sell me your birthright." Esau, in his desperation from hunger, did not think twice. To him, what good was the birthright if he was starving? "What's the point of that blessing now?" he thought. Without considering the future, Esau agreed. And so Jacob, in a cunning way, usurped his brother's birthright. That was the first great betrayal that marked the lives of Jacob and Esau. But the story was far from over. Now imagine a scene of a home filled with tension. Isaac, the father of Jacob and Esau, was already old. His eyes, which once saw the world clearly, could now barely see. He knew his time was nearing its end, and, according to tradition, it was time to bless his eldest son, Esau. The blessing was something sacred, a gesture that passed the leadership of the family and great responsibilities to the firstborn. Isaac called Esau and asked him to go hunting and prepare a savory meal, as only Esau knew how to make. After eating, Isaac would give Esau the much-anticipated blessing. Without a second thought, Esau grabbed his weapons and went in search of a hunt to please his father. But Rebekah, their mother, heard everything. From the beginning, her favorite had always been Jacob. And at that moment, she made a bold decision, one that would change the course of the family's history. Rebekah rushed to Jacob and said, "Your father is going to bless Esau, but I want you to receive that blessing instead." Jacob, though surprised, hesitated for a moment. "But, mother, what if my father realizes that I am not Esau? He will curse me instead of blessing me." Rebekah was determined. "Let the curse fall on me, my son. Just do as I say." She then devised a plan. Knowing that Isaac could no longer see, Rebekah prepared Isaac's favorite meal and took Esau's best clothes for Jacob to wear. But there was a detail. Esau was a hairy man, while Jacob had smooth skin. To solve this, Rebekah covered Jacob's arms and neck with goat skins, making him appear like Esau. Jacob then entered Isaac's room with a racing heart. He approached his father and said, "Father, here I am. I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you asked. Please eat and bless me." Isaac, suspicious, replied, "How did you manage to hunt so quickly, my son?" Jacob, nervous, answered, "The Lord, your God, gave me success." Even so, Isaac still had doubts. He asked Jacob to come closer to touch him. When Isaac felt Jacob's hairy arms, he said, "The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's." Confused, but convinced, Isaac blessed Jacob, giving him everything that would have been Esau's: the leadership of the family, prosperity, and the promise that his descendants would be great. It was a powerful blessing, one that could not be revoked. Shortly after Jacob left, Esau arrived, ready to receive his blessing. He prepared the food and entered Isaac's room, saying, "Father, here I am. Get up and eat so you can bless me." Isaac, surprised and shaken, realized what had happened. Who was the one who came before and already received the blessing? And that blessing cannot be taken back. Esau, realizing that he had been deceived by his brother, was devastated. He begged for a blessing, but Isaac could only give him a lesser one, and Esau's hatred for Jacob grew immensely. He swore that as soon as Isaac died, he would kill Jacob. Rebekah, upon hearing Esau's intentions, warned Jacob, "You must flee, my son. Go to my brother Laban's house until Esau's anger subsides." And so, Jacob, with the stolen blessing, had to leave his home and flee to save his life, beginning a new journey full of challenges and lessons. Imagine Jacob, fleeing the fury of his brother Esau, feeling the weight of his decisions, forced to leave behind his family, his land, and everything he knew. His journey took him to a distant place, to the house of his uncle Laban, a man known for his cunning, just as Jacob was known for his own cleverness. Upon arriving, tired and full of uncertainties, Jacob had an encounter that would change his life forever. One day, as Jacob rested by a well, he saw a young woman approaching. It was Rachel, Laban's daughter, tending to her father's sheep. She was of a beauty that captivated the heart, and when Jacob saw her, he felt an intense emotion that he had never felt before. He offered to help, and with a gesture of strength and dedication, he removed the stone covering the well and gave water to Rachel's flock. That was their first meeting, and Jacob immediately fell in love. Rachel brought Jacob to Laban's house, where he was greeted with hugs and hospitality. But it soon became clear that Laban was not an easy man to deal with. After a month, Laban made Jacob an offer. "It's not right for you to work for me for free, just because you are my relative. Tell me, what do you want as payment?" Without hesitation, Jacob replied, "I will work for you for 7 years if you give me your daughter Rachel in marriage." Laban agreed to the deal. And so, Jacob began his work, tending to Laban's flocks, with a heart full of hope and love for Rachel. The 7 years seemed to pass quickly for Jacob, for he was deeply in love with Rachel. For him, those days of hard work were light, as he knew that, in the end, he would have the woman he loved as his wife. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived. The wedding was arranged, a great feast was held, and Jacob was eager to start his life with Rachel. But Laban, cunning as he was, had other plans. That night, he swapped the sisters, and instead of Rachel, Laban gave his eldest daughter, Leah, to be Jacob's wife. In the darkness of the night, Jacob did not notice the switch. When morning came and the light revealed the truth, Jacob was shocked and furious. He confronted Laban. "What have you done to me? Didn't I work 7 years for Rachel? Why did you deceive me?" Laban calmly replied, "Here in our land, it's not customary to marry off the younger daughter before the older one. Finish the wedding week with Leah, and I will give you Rachel as well, but you'll have to work another 7 years for her." Still in love with Rachel, Jacob accepted the offer, though his heart was heavy with Laban's betrayal. He completed the week with Leah and finally married Rachel, the woman he loved so dearly. However, his marriage to 2 sisters brought with it many complications, and Jacob's life became even more challenging. But despite the difficulties, Jacob persevered. He worked another 7 years for Laban, diligently tending the flocks, all for the love of Rachel. The story of Jacob, Rachel, and Leah is marked by deception, hard work, and a love that defied time and circumstances. Jacob's years of working for Laban were long and challenging. Although he had won Rachel's love, his journey was far from over. Laban, being a shrewd man, took advantage of Jacob's dedication, always finding ways to prolong his work. However, during this time, Jacob also proved to be a skilled and blessed man. He devoted himself to caring for Laban's flocks, and his efforts began to produce impressive results. Laban noticed that since Jacob had started working for him, his wealth had multiplied. His flocks were healthier, more numerous, and everything Jacob touched prospered. This made Laban want to keep Jacob around for as long as possible. But Jacob, after so many years of service, knew it was time to build something of his own, to have his own flock and take care of his family. Jacob proposed a clever deal to Laban. He would tend the flocks, but in return, he would take the speckled or spotted sheep and goats, which were rarer. Laban, thinking he was getting the better end of the deal, quickly agreed. What he didn't expect was that God would continue to bless Jacob. Over time, Jacob's flocks grew larger, stronger, and more numerous, while Laban's diminished. Jacob's prosperity did not go unnoticed. He not only had vast and healthy flocks, but also a large family with many children. Laban and his sons began to look at Jacob with envy and distrust. Tensions between them grew. Laban, who had once seen Jacob as a valuable ally, now considered him a threat. The situation became increasingly uncomfortable, and Jacob felt he was no longer welcome in his uncle's house. Then God spoke to Jacob. In a dream, God told him it was time to return to the land of his fathers, the land he had promised to Abraham and Isaac. Jacob knew this decision wouldn't be easy. There were many complications. Laban wouldn't let him go easily, and his brother Esau, whom he had deceived years ago, might still harbor hatred toward him. Even so, Jacob trusted God and decided to act. He called Rachel and Leah, his wives, and explained the situation. God has blessed me, but tensions with your father and brothers are growing. It's time for us to leave. God has told me to return to the land of my fathers, and I know he will be with us. Rachel and Leah agreed, knowing that their father, Laban, had not treated them fairly. They also believed that Jacob was blessed by God and that he would protect them. So, in the quiet of the early morning, Jacob gathered all that he owned: his flocks, his servants, his wives, his children. He left in secret without telling Laban, to avoid immediate conflict. Jacob knew the journey would be long and full of challenges, but he was determined to follow God's plan. When Laban finally discovered that Jacob had left, he was furious. He pursued Jacob, determined to confront him. But before he could cause any harm, God appeared to Laban in a dream and warned him not to do anything against Jacob. Fearing God's wrath, Laban reached Jacob but was forced to make a peaceful agreement. They established a symbolic boundary and vowed not to cross it to harm each other. With this, Jacob departed in peace, finally free from Laban's manipulation, but with another challenge in mind: the reunion with his brother Esau, the one he had deceived in the past. Jacob knew he needed to face what he had left behind, and now, with a large family and much wealth, he was ready to follow the path God had prepared for him. Jacob's journey teaches us that, even amid difficulties, conflicts, and deceptions, God is always present, guiding and blessing those who trust in him. Here is the text translated into English without changing any words. As requested, Jacob's life was about to take a great turn. After many years living in his uncle Laban's house, accumulating wealth, a large family, and an extensive flock, God spoke to Jacob once again. God said to him, "Return to the land of your fathers where you were born. It is time to return to your homeland." But there was a big problem. In his homeland was Esau, his older brother, the man Jacob had deceived so many years ago. He clearly remembered the last time he saw Esau, hatred in his eyes, promising to kill him for having stolen his blessing. Fear invaded Jacob's heart. He knew he would have to face this shadow from his past. Despite this fear, Jacob trusted God and knew he could not disobey the divine order. He gathered his large family, his servants, his flocks, and began the long journey home. But with every step he took toward the land of his fathers, the fear of meeting Esau only grew. Jacob knew he couldn't just arrive empty-handed. He needed to calm Esau's heart somehow. So he carefully devised a plan. First, he sent messengers ahead to meet Esau and tell him that Jacob was returning and that he came in peace. The messengers had the mission of discovering how Esau would react upon hearing Jacob's name again. When the messengers returned, the news they brought made Jacob even more apprehensive. They said, "Esau is coming to meet you with 400 men. 400 men. That could only mean one thing: war." Esau was coming for revenge, and Jacob feared the worst. Desperate and not knowing what to do, Jacob prayed to God, pleading for protection. "O Lord, God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, who said to me, 'Return to your land and to your relatives, and I will make everything go well.' I am not worthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown to your servant. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I fear he may come and attack me and my family." Even with his heart heavy with fear, Jacob did not give up trying to appease Esau. He organized a large amount of gifts: flocks of goats, sheep, camels, cows, and donkeys. Each group of animals was sent ahead in intervals with a clear message: "These are gifts for my lord Esau, from his servant Jacob." With each gift, he hoped Esau's heart would soften a little more. Additionally, Jacob made another strategic decision. He divided his caravan into two groups. Fearing the worst, he thought that if Esau attacked one group, the other might escape. It was a safety measure, a way to try to save at least part of his family. The tension was palpable. Jacob knew that the encounter with Esau was drawing closer, and he was prepared to face whatever came, even if it meant his brother's deadly revenge. But deep down, he hoped and prayed that God would be with him, that this would not be the end, but a new beginning. The night before the reunion with Esau would be one of the most decisive and profound moments in Jacob's life, and little did he know that his greatest encounter that night would not be with his brother, but with God himself. The night before Jacob's reunion with Esau was one of the most intense of his life. Imagine the scene. Jacob is alone, in an isolated camp on the banks of the Jabbok River, with a heart full of anxiety and fear. He had done everything he could, prayed to God, sent gifts to Esau, and even divided his group to try to protect his family. But that night, he knew the real challenge was yet to come. Darkness enveloped the camp, and Jacob, exhausted and restless, sought a way to calm his mind. He was worried about what would happen the next day. Did Esau still hold a grudge? Would he come with his 400 men to destroy everything Jacob had built? It was in this atmosphere of tension and solitude that something extraordinary happened. Out of nowhere, Jacob was attacked by a mysterious man. There were no words, just the immediate impact of a fierce struggle. The two grappled, trading blows, fighting intensely for hours as if their lives depended on it. Jacob, no longer young, fought with all his might. This was no ordinary fight. The man seemed to have superhuman strength, but Jacob did not give up. He was determined not to be defeated. Time passed, and the fight continued until the man, seeing that Jacob would not yield, touched Jacob's hip, and with a simple touch, dislocated his joint. The pain was immediate and unbearable, but Jacob, even limping, refused to let the man go. Finally, the mysterious man spoke. "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob, in a moment of deep determination and faith, replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." That request changed everything. The man then asked, "What is your name?" Jacob replied, "My name is Jacob." And with that, the man said something that would change Jacob's life forever. "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men, and have overcome." At that moment, Jacob realized that he was not fighting an ordinary man. That mysterious opponent was, in fact, God himself in human form. Jacob, amid the pain and exhaustion, understood that this struggle was much more than a physical battle. It was a spiritual struggle, a transformation taking place within him. Throughout his life, Jacob had been known as someone who deceived and manipulated to get what he wanted. His name, Jacob, meant he who grasps the heel, a reference to his cunning nature. But now, after this divine struggle, his name was changed to Israel, which means he who struggles with God. This name change was not just symbolic but represented a new phase in Jacob's life. He would no longer be the man who deceived. Now he would be someone transformed by God's power. After blessing him, the man disappeared, and Jacob was left alone again. But he was no longer the same. He limped until daybreak, carrying the physical mark of that struggle on his body, but also carrying a new identity, a new mission. In that place, Jacob named it Peniel, which means face of God. For he said, "I saw God face to face, and my life was spared." That encounter not only changed Jacob's name but also his heart. He understood that even in the most difficult moments, God was by his side, transforming his story. Now, with new strength and confidence in God, Jacob, or rather Israel, was ready to meet Esau. He knew that regardless of what happened, he was no longer alone, for he had been blessed by God himself. Jacob, now with the new name of Israel and marked by his struggle with God, knew that he was about to face the most feared moment of his life. After years of separation and a past of betrayal, he was finally approaching the reunion with his brother Esau. The memories of the deception were still strong in his mind. The stolen birthright, the fraudulent blessing of his father Isaac. It was impossible to forget the look of fury on Esau's face, who had sworn to kill him. As Jacob approached Esau, he felt his heart race. The fear that Esau still wanted revenge was overwhelming. To try to smooth over the encounter, Jacob sent caravans of gifts ahead, flocks of sheep, goats, camels, and oxen, in the hope of calming his brother's wrath. He prepared for the worst, even dividing his family into groups, fearing that if Esau attacked, at least one part would escape. But at that critical moment, something extraordinary happened. When Jacob saw Esau in the distance, he began to approach him reverently, bowing 7 times as a sign of respect, each step heavier than the last. He was ready to face any consequences that might come. His eyes were fixed on Esau's face, searching for signs of anger, hatred, or revenge. Suddenly, Esau ran towards him. Jacob's heart raced. But instead of attacking him, Esau opened his arms and hugged him tightly, a hug full of love and longing. And then tears began to fall. They were not tears of resentment, but of joy and emotion. Esau cried with happiness at seeing his brother again, the one he had not seen for so many years. Jacob, unable to believe what was happening, also began to cry. The tension and fear that he had carried in his heart for so long dissolved in that moment of reconciliation. Esau, the brother he had betrayed, was forgiving him so purely, so completely. Instead of revenge, there was forgiveness. Instead of hatred, there was love. Esau, looking at Jacob with tears in his eyes, said, "Who are all these with you?" Jacob, moved, introduced his family, his wives, his children, and all his servants. He explained that everything he had was a gift from God, and that the flocks he had sent earlier were gifts to Esau, as a request for forgiveness. But Esau, with a warm smile, replied, "I already have enough, my brother. Keep what is yours." Esau did not want Jacob's gifts. He did not want anything in return. What he really wanted was to be reunited with his brother. And Jacob, insisting, asked Esau to accept, not as payment, but as a sign of reconciliation. Finally, Esau accepted the gifts, but what really mattered at that moment was the forgiveness that had been granted. In that encounter, we saw the manifestation of God's transforming power. Esau, who had once sworn revenge, had been touched by God's grace and mercy, and was now willing to forgive. Jacob, who had carried the burden of guilt for so long, finally experienced the freedom that only forgiveness can bring. The power of forgiveness is profound. It heals old wounds, restores relationships, and transforms hearts. The story of Jacob and Esau reminds us that no matter how deep the hurts and betrayals, God is able to bring reconciliation where it seems impossible. At the end of their encounter, the two brothers walked side by side, not as enemies, but as family. That moment was a living testimony that forgiveness can rewrite destiny and that brotherly love, under God's blessing, can overcome any obstacle.